Why was Silliman Institute placed in a small backwater town in a beautiful but blighted rural province? Needless to say, there had been no feasibility studies, no exhaustive explorations of other possible locations. Placing it in Dumaguete was pretty much due to the enthusiasm of one person, David Hibbard, a young, inexperienced missionary pastor who had been in the Philippines barely for months. The Silliman story began one day early in 1899 in New York City. A retired business executive, Horace B. Silliman showed up on the doorstep of the Presbyterian Board of Foreign Missions on Fifth Avenue with a strange proposal. He wanted to establish a trade and agricultural school for Filipino boys and was prepared to put up $10,000 to get the project started. Dr. Silliman took the mission executives by surprise. The United States had only come into possession of the Philippine Islands 2 months before, and as yet the Presbyterians did not even have missionaries there. Thinking that establishing a school was decidedly premature, the board tried to advise Dr. Silliman to perhaps consider supporting a school in some other country. But the visitor persisted. It was in the Philippines or nothing. In his 75th year, Horace Silliman had enjoyed a successful business career and had amassed a modest fortune. He was known as a generous philanthropist, supporting a number of American schools and colleges, among other causes. Somehow, the Philippines had captured his imagination upon the encouragement of his wife, and in a small way he wanted to have a part in America's new colonial venture. Moreover, he had been impressed by the success of the Hampton Institute in Virginia in training rural black young people for skilled occupations, and in his mind's eye he saw another Hampton Institute blossoming in the islands. Actually, in its eagerness to take advantage of the new opening in the Philippine Islands to spread the evangelical faith, the Presbyterian Board lost no time in recruiting missionaries. Dr. and Mrs. James Rogers were hurriedly transferred from Brazil, and a promising young couple, David and Laura Hibbard, was commissioned. The Rogers arrived in April 1899, and the Hibbards a month later. Dr. F. Ellenwood, Senior Secretary of the Presbyterian Board, in a series of letters to the newly arrived recruits outlined possibilities for an industrial school to be funded by Silliman and directed them to seek a location on the islands south of Manila. In October 1899, Hibbard set out on a voyage to the south. He had planned to visit Cebu, Zamboanga, and Iloilo. But in Cebu, someone suggested that he take a side trip to Dumaguete on the neighboring island of Negros. Taking an overnight steamer, he arrived on the shore of Dumaguete in early morning. Hibbard wrote that he was captivated by the unsurpassed drama of a Dumaguete morning from the sea. He was not only overwhelmed by the beauty of the place, but the warmth of the welcome he received. Captain Burns, the commander of the U.S. Army unit, and the chaplain, John Randolph, received him and introduced him to the Presidente, or Mayor Melitón Larena, and to his brother, Don Demetrio Larena, the governor. Hibbard was indeed surprised because at this time the Filipinos were still at war with the Americans, and being warmly welcomed by local officials was a big factor in future things to come. Eventually, everyone expressed eagerness to have an English school in Dumaguete. After making stopovers in the Visayas and Mindanao, Hibbard returned to Manila fully convinced that Dumaguete should be the location for a new mission station and a school. Actually, Dumaguete, though considered remote from the major urban centers, had a number of things going for it. It was in the geographical center of the Visayas Island region with a total population of close to 3 million. Negros Occidental and Panay to the west, and Cebu, Bohol, Leyte, and Samar to the east. Also, Dumaguete was on the major steamship lines route connecting Manila, Cebu, Iloilo, and Zamboanga, thus making the place accessible if only a permanent port would be constructed. The question arises, why was Dr. David Hibbard given such an exuberant welcome in Dumaguete? After all, many Filipinos were incensed about the American invasion, and a bloody battle was being waged between American and Filipino military forces on other islands. There was widespread resentment and anger that the United States was threatening the Filipinos' chance for independence. In most places in the Philippines, the idea of an American colonial guest would have been met with hostility. To begin with, Oriental Negros had not been on the forefront of the revolution against Spain. There was general support for the aims of the revolution, but it was only in the final months of the war against Spain that General Aguinaldo commissioned Don Diego de la Viña to be commander. of the Revolutionary Army in Negros Oriental. By that time, the Spanish military and government officials were making plans to depart with Admiral Dewey's annihilation of the Spanish Armada in Manila Bay on May 1, 1898. Subsequently, when the expected Spanish reinforcements did not arrive, the Spaniards saw that their days in the Philippines were numbered. Another reason why Hibbard was accorded such a friendly welcome was that he was not greeted by Roman Catholics. Larena and his family were members of the Philippine Independent Church, the church which had broken away from Catholics under the leadership of Gregorio Ugly Pie, who was to become supreme bishop of the new church. With the departures of the Spanish friars from Negros Oriental, the parish churches of the province, which had never been spiritually robust, were left without priests. The Ugly Pians quickly moved to the leadership vacuum and eventually usurped the church leadership, since the independent church had become the Church of the Revolution. It is easy to understand why Larena and other political leaders decided to belong to the new independent church. After due deliberation back in New York and Manila, David Hibbard's strong recommendation was approved and Dumaguete was chosen as the site of what was to be called Silliman Institute, following the nomenclature used for Hampton Institute. Early in 1900, James Rogers and a new medical missionary stationed in Iloilo, A.J. Hall, moved to purchase land for the new school. They paid 350.0 pesos or $128 for a 1.2-hectare waterfront lot in which Silliman Hall now stands. The Hibbards arrived in Dumaguete on August 12, 1901. They were able to rent a beautiful Spanish-style house facing the ocean, which had been the former residence of the Spanish governors. The ground floor of the two-story building had thick walls made of coral. The second floor had a fine-looking hardwood floor. The Hibbards took residence on the second floor, and the ground floor was converted to 2 classrooms. The Hibbards did not lose any time opening the school. On August 28, 1901, 15 of what he described as hatless, barefoot boys appeared for class. The ages of the boys ranged from 12 to 16. By the end of September, the enrollment had reached 35, and the age range had stretched further from 7 to 24. There were no lesson guides, so the Hibbards were thrown on their own ingenuity to devise a flexible curriculum that would meet the individual needs of such a disparate group. Who were these students? From what kind of families did they come from? In reading the story of Silliman's beginnings, many have assured that the shoeless lads were of the poorest of the poor, but this was not the case. Even though by Western standards they could be considered poor in terms of the Filipino class structure, they came from more privileged families.